Good morning, friends. Welcome to the Wednesday LiveStream from Dulcimer Crossing. I'm Steve Uhlberg, and today our theme is, what are all these numbers that are in music? I'm someone who grew up pretty math challenged. I got good grades, top grades in everything except math. I just couldn't wrap my head around it. And that's sometimes what happens. So I'm just trying to get everything that's a week ago. Here's today's. All right. So I have a handout that I've prepared that I'm going to share on my screen to help us talk through these. So let's open the handout. Music always made sense. Numbers didn't for me. And when I start working with people, it seems like we have this whole slew of numbers and people get lost in the middle of the numbers. So I thought it'd be good to have an opportunity for us to just have these straight. So what are all the numbers in music? First, there are the steps of the scale. And these are also called scale degrees. What do we find when we're going from do to do? We use Arabic numerals for these: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. On any instrument, the first step is called do, and these are the steps that I'm using without alteration, just whatever the steps of the scale are. If we'd have different, this is assuming a major scale. In the diatonic world, there are 7 steps before the note name repeats. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do again. And so the musical alphabet is actually a little bit easier than than the numbers in the musical world. In the chromatic world, there are 12 steps before they repeat. This is the Western world, which are do, di, re, mi, fa, fi, so, si, la, li, te, or la, te, ti, do, instead of do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. In other parts of the world, there are even more steps in the scale. So this has to do with mean and just temperament and those kind of things. Some parts of the world use 15 steps, some between do and do, some use 21. Some are based on equal temperament scales of 24 pitches. They don't usually use all of them, but they have all those available to us. In the Western world, we focus on 12 for the chromatic scale. So the first thing is, this is the way we describe the steps of the scale. If I'm in a key, I'm going to use my hammered dulcimer as my example here. If I'm in the key of D, that would be my 1. And as I'm going up the scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8 being a repeat of 1. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, di, do. Now, I could also go straight up and I'm going to get a different scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, because that note is a flatted 7 instead of the other one. So when I use those numbers and add the flat symbol, what I'm doing is altering that scale to give me a different scale, but it's still 7 steps before they repeat. It would be do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, te, do in the movable do solfege system. So that's the first set of numbers that I want to talk about today. The next set of numbers are chords. And you might hear people talk about the 1, the 4, and the 5. And I use my handy dandy chord finder, which is built into all of us if we use the international I love you sign, as a way to help with this. Anything pointing out are major chords, everything pointing toward the middle are minor chords. My pinky is always 1 in this picture. 1, 2 minor, 3 minor, 4 major, 5 major, and then if I'd have a 6, it would be minor also. On our page, that's what's described. The 1, 4, and 5 are uppercase, and the 2, 3, 6 are all lowercase, and then the 7 has got a little Fahrenheit or circle beside it. That means that that's diminished. We're not going to get into that today. We've talked about it before. But songs tend to have chord frameworks. Some are built on drones where you don't have any chords. But in the Western world, a lot of the tunes that we like to play have chords, and they can be described numerically. Now, the Nashville numbering system makes use of these all the time. They will use either Arabic numbers or Arabic numerals or Roman numerals as ways to describe this. I think that's hugely confusing. So I always use Roman numerals to describe chords because I don't have to add anything to it to let me know if it's major or minor. And the system still works if I'm in a minor scale. I'm just starting in a new location. Now, inside, just like I have 3 knuckles in each one of my fingers, well, maybe not my thumb. I have 2 knuckles there, but I'm going to pretend. But inside each one of these chords are a 1, 3, 5, 1, 3, 5, 1, 3, 5, which make up that chord. So the steps of the scale, if I play the first step, and then the third step, and the 5th step, I get a scale, and that's the major scale. Now you'll notice the next one is minor. If I play the 2, the 5, the second step, the 5th step, and the 6th step, the 4th, 2, 4, 6, I get a minor chord because I have a 1, a flat 3, and a 5, a 1, a flat 3, and a 5, a 1, flat 3, and a 5. That's the second step. We got 1, flat 3, and a 5. Then this one's going to have 1, flat 3, and a 5. 4 is going to have 1, 3, 5. 5 is going to have 1, 3, 5. 6 will have 1, flat 3, and 5, which is why those are described that way. One of the benefits of playing music this way or thinking about music this way is that I don't have to be stuck in a particular key. This is very helpful for transposing if you want to have a song that fits in your voice. If I learn the song by the chords, by numeral, by relationship, it's easier to move to a new key. It may be written in a difficult key to play on the hammered dulcimer, A flat, not impossible, but challenging. So I might want to play it in A, which is very accessible and easy, and it's only a half step away. So now my A flats, every one of them in the key of A, that's the one chord. Now I play an A instead of an A flat. And that begins to help me move forward because I'm thinking not about specific pitches, I'm thinking about relationships of chords to each other. Now, the next thing that happens with us in numbers is fingers. I'm going to do my overhand here. So if I'm playing piano, my thumbs are always called 1, and my index are always called 2, my middle are always called 3, my ring are always called 4, and my pinky's always called 5. That's the way it is for piano. And if you're a piano player, this is where there can be a big challenge. Because when I come to a mountain dulcimer, my thumb is always a T. This relates to the fact that on a mountain dulcimer, our thumb can be in front and also be played. But on a guitar, for example, if I'm going to be playing with my fingers on the fretboard, my thumb is backstage, and it's always called a T because it's working backstage. It can sometimes fret a note like it sometimes wraps around like that, but it's not something, I'm not playing over the top like this normally. There are people who do. I'm not one of them. So when I'm talking about my fingers and playing either kind of dulcimer, this is always a thumb and 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you're a piano player and I'll say put your first finger, that's where some people get confused. Now, the next thing where we can sometimes have confusion is I'll be talking about scale degrees, I'll be talking about chords, I'll be talking about fingers, and then there are frets. On the mountain dulcimer, I have a 0 fret, which lets me, I have a note when I put no fingers down. I have a first fret. On this one, I have a 1.5 fret, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6.5, 7, 8, 8.5, 9, 10, and it continues all the way up. Now, this is an instrument that's got some extra frets. You noticed I said and a half. On a traditional mountain dulcimer, there originally were no such things as half frets. I'd have my open 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And when I'd play that, I get that same scale that on the hammer dulcimer I got when I went straight up. So on this fret system, when I play, I start at 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 to get the major scale I'm looking for. So I have to play between 3 and 10. Now that means my first step of the scale is going to be at fret 3. Can you see where the confusion comes in here, right? That's what can happen. Is we get so tied up in learning fret numbers or scale numbers or whichever one we hang our hat on, that when they're being used in different ways, it can be hard sometimes to make the conversion. Now, I showed you the extra frets before the diatonic instrument. I have a cardboard chromatic mountain dulcimer, but for right now, I'm going to use guitar as my demonstration of the half frets or the chromatic scale. On the mountain dulcimer, these two create the first fret, but I have 2 steps inside there. I have 0, and if I slide, it's going to take me. That's my first one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then on 13 is when the octave comes again. So that's the 12-tone scale that I talked about earlier. 12 before they repeat. At the 12th fret is when everything repeats. But I played 1 open, and I included that as my name of the scale. So that's why the numbers get a little funky for us sometimes. So you can have, in fact, in Erin May's Chromatic Chord Encyclopedia, she lists everything here with the top description. It has a sharp sign there. That's letting us know she's using chromatic fret numbers the same way that they would be on a guitar or a mandolin or banjo. The bottom one are the ones that are diatonic that we would expect in more of the dulcimer world. So there are different ways to think about it, even if you have all the frets on your instrument. The next group of numbers that I want to talk about are what's on, and I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. And I'm going to hide that. Are based on the course, are called courses. Anytime you have 2 strings that are closely, 2 or more strings that are closely strung together, that's called a course on an instrument. So on a 12-string guitar, there are 6 2-string courses. On this mountain dulcimer, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. On my super bass, I have 2 up here, so this would be a 9, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 9, 2, 19. And then I have a little 1 up here. And then I've got an 8, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. This would actually be called a 9, 2, 19, 18 because this is, even though it's moved over a little bit, it's actually considered to be a part of that one. That's a typical way that dulcimers will talk about with each other. How many courses do you have? On instruments that don't have a super bass bridge or none of these little bridgelets, it's going to be typically a 16, 15, 15, 14, 12, 11, 13, 12, something like that, where you're counting the number of groups. The first instrument I built had 3-string courses. So every one of these pitches that is going across here had 3 different strings that would make it up. In the Dutch hop tradition in Colorado, they were generally building with 4-string courses. And I met a guy from Edmonton, Canada, who played in the Ukrainian tradition, and he had 5-string courses on his instrument. So, and there are other instruments where there's only 1-string courses. And some of my lower ones, my lower strings, are single-string courses as well. Just like in a piano, if you look, there will be varying numbers of strings. The higher you go, there'll be more strings to get the same pitch. The lower you go, the bigger the string gets. Sometimes is almost as big as your finger, and you just need one to get, because it's mass being vibrated. So the number of courses is the description of how many courses do you have. And that'll determine the range of your instrument, and then how many in each course will determine how fast it's going to get tuned. Okay, so let's go back to the front camera and let's share again. So now the question is intervals, and this might be the one that causes or brings up the most questions. And Jamie, you're saying that when there's a 3+ or a 4+ fret, that messes your brain up. Yeah, you just got your new one too. It's always exciting to see baby pictures of a new dulcimer. And you posted it in front of your Christmas tree. I love that. So Merry Christmas to you. Yes. The before we get to intervals, the thing that is the difference between diatonic instruments and chromatic instruments is, in diatonic instruments, normally you just go to the next fret and it's going to be part of the scale. On a chromatic instrument, you're spending a lot of time thinking, what do I skip? On a diatonic, it's, do I go up or down? Is it by a neighbor? Is it by a skip, or larger than a skip, which is a jump? On a guitar, for example, I'm always thinking, which ones do I skip to get the scale I want? Because it's always going to involve a skip. Now, back to intervals. Intervals are the space between 2 notes or pitches. So if I, and this is how it works on a mountain dulcimer. We'll do a hammer dulcimer demonstration in just a moment. I'm going to move my face because I'm kind of in the way there. Okay, there we go. So here's the 0 fret, 1, 2, 3, etc. But now between 0 and 1 is an interval. So this is going to the first step of the scale. That's the interval of a second. And there's the numbers again. I'm going from 0 to the first fret. That's 0 is the first step of the scale, which is, now this is the second step. And it's because there's a whole step here. In the chromatic scale, I divide these all up, and those would all be called half steps, which is why this has the long, long, short, long, long, short, 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 long, long, short, long, long, short, 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 long, long, short. It's a repeating pattern that's going up because it's mostly a diatonic fretboard with the addition of a 6.5 and a 13.5. And believe me, when I first got that, the problem you're having with 3+ and 4+ was what I was having all the time. But as I go up, this is a second. From 0 to the second fret is a third, and it's a major third too. You can see it's 2 long frets. So it'd be like half, 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 or two wholes. But if I go from 1 to 2, that's a second also. But when I go from 1 to 3, it's a third. I mean, it is a third, but the difference here is that it's a minor third because I've got a long fret and a short fret, which means I have 1.5 steps. When I go from the second fret to the fourth fret, it is a third, but it's a minor third because I've got a short fret and a long fret. When I get to the third fret and go to 5, that's a major third. I've got 2 long frets in there. When I go from 4 to 6, I got a minor third again because I've got a long fret and a short fret. But if I go to 6.5, I've got a major third. When I go from 5 to 7, I've got a minor third again because I have this small fret and the 2 small ones, which equal 1 long one. When I go from 6 to 8, I get a major third because I've got this long one and these 2 short ones make a long one. If I go from the 6.5 to the 8, I've got a minor third again because I've got the long fret and the short fret. So those are the typical intervals in the diatonic scale. Now, I'm using the frets going up and down to illustrate it, but I can go across and get the same thing. So in Western music, the fifth is really important, having that there. Unison is when you play 2 notes that are the same pitch right next to each other. If I twinkle, twinkle, little star, that's typical of that fifth interval. But I've tuned it D-A-D so that D-E-F sharp G-A, this pitch matches this pitch. So the interval of fifth right now is going across from the bass to the A. Let me show you something that is a little confusing. Oops, I forgot to stop my sharing so you could see what I was doing. So D, E, F sharp, G, A, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I started at 0. I'm at the 4th fret, but in pitches, steps of the scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those 2 match each other at the 4th fret, which is the 5th step of the scale, is what my middle string is tuned to right now. And that means when I play this, I've got a 1 and a 5. And you might have heard me say before that when I'm playing like this, I'm playing power chords. There's no third in here to tell me what kind of a chord it is. So this particular chord could be major or minor. Okay, are there questions about that? I thought I ended this. I'm going to close that for a minute. See what happens. That's what I needed to do. I was stopping in the wrong place. Got it. They moved the controls into a different location. Now, that means 1 5 5 1 5 1 5 1. However, and this is the thing that confuses a lot of us a lot of the time, when I'm going from do to the 5th, it's a 5th relationship. When I'm going to the 5th or sol back to do, it's a 4th relationship because I have 1, 2, 3, 4. From 0 to the 3rd fret is where I get the octave. And that's what happens when it's equal on both sides. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. if I do it this way, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, in order to get to fifth, I have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and only leaves 3 steps left to get to do. And because when you have equals, there's a line in the middle, which is not a pitch. You can divide it in half. You can cut your pizza pie in half, and there's both sides, and what's in the middle? An empty pizza pan. So that's that. The question is, what's an imperfect fifth? And that gets us, thank you, that gets us to the chromatic intervals. And there is a whole blog here that goes through this, and I think some very helpful ways. So I'm going to click on, I'm going to copy that. Oops, can I? I might have to do it this way. And I'm going to put it into the chat. The name for something which is not a perfect fifth is a diminished fifth. If it's lowered by a half step, it's a diminished fifth. If it's raised by a half step, it's an augmented fifth. So generally, the major and minor has to do with the third step of the scale. The augmenting and diminishing has to do with the fifth. So there's nothing like the sound. When you can hear that note, right? So here's the C chord. I'm raising it by a half step, which augments that. It's a G sharp, which is the fifth of the C scale, raised by a half step. And that gets me to my 4 chord, which is an F. I get to the end. The sound of a woman in love when she's in love with you. That was a G sharp before. Now I'm thinking of it as an A flat because it's an F major, F minor, gets me back to C. So what's going on with the fifth can help me move between chords very interestingly. And that would be both an augmented, the G is augmented to get from the C chord to the F at the beginning, and to get back to the C chord, the flatted third of the F, the third becomes a flatted third, which gets me back to the G. Now it's also that's an augmented one. A diminished one is when I have instead of the regular 5, I have to flat the fifth. And so 1 flat 3 flat 5 produces the diminished chord. Now we're not talking about adding the other extensions and things that happen here. Okay? I hope that answers your question. I hope you have fun with that link to that blog. I have a couple of other things I want to call attention to numerically. So let's do that again. Okay, that got put at the bottom. That's why that threw me off. Okay. The next thing is Hertz, and this is more up your line of measuring things, Jim. Hertz equals 1 second. 1 Hertz equals 1 cycle per second of whatever it is that's vibrating. And the frequency of the vibration is how fast it happens in a second. A vibrating string produces a pitch at a particular frequency. And that's why our tuners work, because they're tuned to match that. In the old days, the A440 used to be the dial tone in Austria. So you could always tune your violin. You just pick up your phone and listen to that pitch and you'd have an A. An A440. Now, let me stop sharing and come over here. On a hammered dulcimer, A440 is this A that is in the G box. Here's middle C. So it's the A that's the second space from the bottom of the treble clef. It can be found on the other side of the D, or it can be found in the G box. They're the same pitch, but that's when I take a tuning fork and make it vibrate. That's what it's hearing. On a mountain dulcimer, while the name A is this middle string, you can hear those are not the same octave. So I have to walk up the scale. The middle string, if I'm tuned to DAD at the 7th fret, is A440. If I have my instrument tuned to DAA, seventh fret here is the same DAA. The A's are tuned to the exact same pitch. So on either the middle string or the melody string on a DAA instrument, I'm going to get that A440. Now, the other thing that happens is if I'm here and I go twice as high, so it's A880, I'm going to have an octave higher than that. And an octave because it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 octave, like an octopus or an octagon. We have different names for the notes: A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G, A, and then we start the octave. We start the scale again with the same names. So numbers, we keep on going. With notes, we repeat the names and we recycle. And then harmonics relate to the nodes that are found along the length of the string when it's divided in half. So when I divide the string at the 7th fret, that produces, and I touch it, we've talked about harmonics before, but that's how I find it. It's by numbers. So even though it's tuned to A220, when I play, just touch it very lightly, I get A440. If I go to the 3rd fret and play it again, I get A880. And when I play at the 4th fret, I get the 5th higher. An octave higher than what would be the 5th as I walked up the scale. So that is numbers in music with a particular focus on dulcimers. And I hope that clarified some things, or at least began some awareness. If it didn't clarify, this handout is going to be on the Dulcimer Crossing blog, where you can find it. You can find that at dulcimercrossing.simplero.com. And it's not there yet, but it'll be up as very soon after this conversation ends. And this conversation will be archived here on Facebook. It'll also be archived for all the workshop and membership level people at Dulcimer Crossing in the live events archive. These everything, I started these in March or April of 2020 and have been doing them or recruiting substitutes for the weeks that I'm not here since then. And there's 2 years of archives there. There are a couple of things coming up that I want to call your attention to. The first is tomorrow night is my final concert of the year, and it's a different kind of Christmas concert. It's going to be at online concert thing. You can get tickets there. If you're not able to be there, there will be a way to download the set afterwards, an archive of the set. Different kind of Christmas because when I was working in the inner city, I've always leaned toward the sadder side of things. And when I was working in the inner city, it made Christmas kind of a tough holiday because culturally there's other expectations than sadness. And so a lot of the songs that I wrote during that time were from that place. And that's what's going to be included, as well as some of the fa-la-las as well. And finally, coming up next weekend, Sunday and Monday, are the Quarantine Christmas concerts. Last year there were 4 nights or 3 nights of that. There were a lot more players. This year there's just going to be 2 nights, so that means there have to be fewer players. And that link there will tell you who is playing and what time they're on. We have several Dulcimer Crossing instructors who are performing. This time we have Karen Mueller, Larry and Elaine Conger, and Erin May Lewis, Aubrey Atwater, and Butch Ross are all teachers on Dulcimer Crossing who are going to be sharing music in that concert. So I encourage you to take advantage of those, continue to play the music that moves you, and I will look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you. Bye.